we're going to have an incredible survey over here. We're going to discuss Rembrandt Seminar. We're going to go slow, nice and slow, so everyone will be on the same page with me. So we're going to discuss one of the greatest names in the history of the world. By the way, my name is Albert Ursus. To introduce myself to you, I'm your auctioneer and art director on board. And I come all the way from Croatia, a nice little small, beautiful country in the heart of Mediterranean. I'm very proud and happy to be from there. Now, also, I represent a gallery called Park West Gallery. Over here, you can see our logo. We've been doing this for 47 years already, and we are reputed to be the largest privately owned gallery in the world. We've been doing this now on over 100 ships worldwide. It's an incredibly big operation that we are doing. Now, we're going to talk one of the greatest names in the history of the world. Now, I'm just curious, how many of you heard for Rembrandt Seminar? Show of hands over here. All right, we live on planet Earth. Okay, fantastic. Now, as we know, he's a 16th, 17th century master. Now, as I already shared with you, I'm just reiterate the fact. A few days ago, I met a lady on Lido. She said she actually knows Rembrandt. She went to school with him. He owed her some lunch money. Now, obviously, that's a joke, but, you know, there is possibility that someone actually went to school with Rembrandt Seminar. So let's discuss a little bit Rembrandt. Now, Rembrandt Hermsson von Rijn, born July 15, 1606, passed away October 4th in 1669. Now, his name is Rembrandt Hermsson. His father was Herman Gerritz. He is son of Herman, from Rhine River. His father was, I think it's all too known, his father was a miller, his grandfather was a miller, and their grandfather was a miller. A long lineage of millers, hence the name from Rhine River. They had a mill on the Rhine River. Now, we're going to discuss Rembrandt, his art, life, light, and all that stuff. But I want to give you a little overview of what is happening at the world and in the Netherlands at the time. Because obviously there was a split between Northern and South Netherlands. We know that, you know, it's part of the Flem and Holland and Netherlands. It was a split between North and South. And because of that, the patronage that was existing till that time, it was virtually disappeared. There was no patronage because obviously William the Silent and House of Orange, they did provide a little bit, but not very much. And also because the church divided as well, the commissions from the church also subsided, virtually disappeared. So a lot of the people would actually believe that because of that, the art market disappeared, but on the contrary, it actually bloomed and blossomed. And there was an incredible amount of painters at the time. It's been recorded that in 1600s, in Northern Netherlands, there was twice as much painters than as bakers and 4 as much as butchers, which is incredible. Now, most of these artists, they did not make their living only through painting. They had their steady job, their everyday job, but they would do painting on the side. And because of that, there was a lot of specialists. So, for example, you had an artist that were just a landscape painter. Now, within that, there was a specialist that would paint dunes. There were specialists that would paint trees. Some of them would paint forests. Some of them would paint pumpkins. Some of them would paint winter landscapes, and some even would paint Alps and Italian landscapes. So you had all that, all those little subdivisions within the actual landscape painting. So you as well, you had with still lifes as well, people that would specialize on tulips, on flowers, on grass, and they would actually sometimes collaborate together. For example, a landscape painter would paint a landscape, and a specialist would provide whatever he would specialize. They would actually paint it together. So the art market had a lot of art at the time in the Netherlands. People are not aware of that information. Now, if you think about it, Rembrandt van Rijn from 1600 when he was alive, one of the greatest names in the history of Dutch painting were contemporaries. Jan Steen, Jan van Goyen, we have Johannes Vermeer and Frans Hals. These are his contemporaries. Now, Rembrandt van Rijn was everything but specialist. He specialized in everything. His totality and variety of expressive range impresses us and commands our respect because he painted virtually everything. We know that he was the greatest portrait painter of his days. He painted civic or corporation portraits as well, group portraits. He painted genre painting. He's painted historical scenes. He painted also Bible scenes. He had an incredible range. He was a very adept landscape painter as well. Also, we do know a few things that his principal device in his artwork, principal device that he would use would be light. We know he was a master of light, dark and light contrast. I talked about it, chiaroscuro. Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio started at about 50 years before that. He learned the techniques of the tenorism and the dark and light contrast, and he elevated to the level that is still known as the standard today. So we know that because he would portray light, and it would be equivalent as of art of painting. This is how precisely he would use light in his artwork. And he was also a master of psychological portraiture. We talked about it. I'm going to give you a few examples. He could see you. He would see your soul, and he would be able to portray whatever you feel with also incredible precision. I'm going to give you a little bit, few things that we know a little bit about his life before I delve into more deeper into this lecture. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the preceding lecture, at the age of 14, already enrolled in Leiden University. He was born in Leiden, and he spent all of his life in Leiden and Amsterdam. Never traveled anywhere. It was normally a custom for painters to travel to Italy and get studies done in Italy. They start from Venice and then move from there. But Rembrandt, he never traveled. He stayed all of his life in Holland, and this is where he lived and died, and he made his fame, fortune, and obviously what came after that. At the age of 14, enrolled in Leiden University. That's how already he was established in his head. He was already able to join Leiden University. Now, I will say, he did not spend a lot of time in that university because already at 1621, he went with an artist by the name of Jacob van Swenberg, who was a painter, a minor painter at the time, but it was incredibly important to him because Jacob van Swenberg traveled to Italy, learned some Renaissance techniques there, and he shared that with him. So this was something that he gleaned from him. And then didn't spend a lot of time with him. He then went in 1622 and spent 9 months with a great artist of his time by the name of Peter Lastman. And Peter Lastman was a great painter, incredible painter in fact, and he learned techniques of tenorism, of cross-hatching and bringing light into dark images. And this is what he learned from Peter Lastman, and those lessons never subsided. He would use those things that he learned all the way through his entire career. That was a very important visit that he had. Now, also must be noted that he is already at 1624, he set up a studio in Amsterdam. He already had a studio. At the 1628, he already accepted first pupils. Now, it must be noted, he was 22 years old. He already has students working under him, learning from the master. And he was such a great teacher that his students would create images so great that in history of the world, after he passed away, his students' paintings would sometimes be sold as the ones of Rembrandt van Rijn, because people would not tell apart. Now, in today's day and age, when we have forensic science, we can find out that it was not Rembrandt, is one of his pupils, but he was such a great teacher that his pupils would be sold and their paintings as the ones of Rembrandt van Rijn. Now, also must be noted, he had a tumultuous life. A tumultuous life, and I have to reiterate that because a lot of death befallen him, a lot of calamities befallen this man. He was 8 of 9 children when he was born. Now, in 1640, when his mother passed away, he was only one of 4 children still alive. All the rest of his siblings passed away in that very short span of time. 5 of his siblings. Now, he got married in 1634 with Saskia, his beloved wife. He loved her very much dearly. She was a niece from a famous art dealer in Amsterdam at the time. It helped him with his career. Now, Saskia, from 1635 to 1641, in those 6 years, she had 4 pregnancies. 4. Now, 3 or 4 children that she gave birth to passed away virtually at birth. It's less than 1 month they passed away. The only son that he had that lived to be a grown man, whose name was Titus. It was the last one that he was born. Now, because Saskia had so many pregnancies in such a short time, her body could not take it. And she died from a bloody tuberculosis in 1642. That was a hard blow for him because he loved that woman dearly and deeply as well. Now, after that, even though he was struck by that, he managed to find a companion. And her name was Henrique. He never married her because Saskia left everything that she had, and she had quite a lot of possessions of her own. The dowry was great when they got married. She left it all to their son Titus. So if something would have happened to Titus, and all that is left to him would be given away to the family of Saskia. So he never married Henrique, but she was a companion of him. They spent 9 years together, and he was deeply in love with her as well. But 9 years after the time they spent together, she passed away as well. She was swept by a plague that ravaged Amsterdam at the time. And not only that, his son Titus, the only one who lived to be a grown man, he also passed away before him. In 1669, when he passed away, he was buried in an unmarked grave. Now, it must be noted as well, during his time, when he achieved the apogee in his art, his life and life and insight were so intuitively joined and profoundly analogous that people clamored to get a portrait done by him. Even Queen of Sweden bribed her way to get a portrait done by Rembrandt, the master. Now, he was the wealthiest of them all, most well known, but in 1656 got bankrupted, all his possession taken away, everything and everyone except Titus that he knew died in his life. He was emotional recluse, social destitute, didn't have a dime to his name. That was, in short, Rembrandt life. A rise and fall, one of the greatest names in the history of the world. Now, I said to you that he, and the most well-known things that we have in his painting is life, light, and also psychological portraiture. Now, I want to show you one of the earlier portrait that he did. It is a very moving portrait that I would like to show you. And it's a portrait of Akie Pesser. This is a lady that was age of 83. She was a widow of a brewer from Rotterdam. Now, I wanted to give you that also information because this is a Rotterdam ship sailing out of Rotterdam. And this widow, at a very advanced age, speak about, 83 at that time was a lot to be alive after such an advanced and full life. But the age of 83, she actually traversed and traveled to Amsterdam to get a portrait done by Rembrandt, which speaks about, obviously, what people thought of him as a portrait painter. Now, what have you over here? I want to show you a few different things. Now, obviously, you're going to see an incredible way how he managed to render textures and the actual realism. It's very realistic depiction of what we see. Also, you're going to see the oval composition was very popular at the time. That he's adjusting the contour of her so we have our eyes moving through the composition. Now also you're going to see, look at the white. Can you see the white? It's crisp as frozen snow, soft as cotton wool. It is thick as heavy cream. It's a symphony in white major, so to speak. He had the ability to portray color with incredible precision. You're going to see this is very, very, I would say, handsome way of portraying that cap. But look at the Miss Pesser. Have a look at the face. You're going to feel that anguish fervor. You can feel that emotional qualities that he's portraying to us. Now the reason why I'm showing you this, I want to show you that Rembrandt van Rijn, he was a very young artist when he painted this, that he had that ability already as a young painter. Because a lot of people believe, and even historians that don't know this information obviously, is that because when he achieved the, let's call it achievement, when he got to fall down to his knees, that he had the ability to portray that moving human emotion in people. He would go and paint elderly people and portraits of them. But over here we can discern that even young Rembrandt, as a young artist, had that quality. And he portrayed emotion and psychological portraiture with incredible precision. And that must be noted over here. Now, I already shared with you the image, and I already shared with you in the preceding lectures that it was an incredibly adept civic portrait painter. He is a group portrait painter, one of the greatest in history of the world, and he changed the civic portraits, how they are being painted and rendered, even few times. Over here you're going to see, this is one of the most well-known civic portrait that he created. Obviously, the anatomy lessons of Nicholas Stubb. It was painted around 1632. Now you're going to see over here, he changed the picture how the civic portraits are being painted. Now I already showed you this. One of his great contemporaries, one of the greatest portrait painter of his days, he was his rival, and also he would paint the corporation portrait, as they call it, city portraits, was Franz Hals. You're going to see over here, this is Franz Hals. He painted group portraits, but it's a bit different. You're going to see they're different in style, different in meaning, and also they're generally larger groups, and they have that sense of camaraderie that is more fitting to fraternal banquets. And they're all posing. You can see some of them are looking away in different directions. They're all posing for the painting. Now, if you look at over here, what Rembrandt achieved is completely different. Because same as Franz Hals, people would come, individual sitters would come to him in a studio and they would pose to him. Now over here, if you have a person posing like this, Franz Hals will paint him like this and put him on the table. But not with Rembrandt. Rembrandt would have them pose in the studio. He would capture their facial features. He would create a study that he needed, and then he would fuse them in a situation that is something that is unbelievable. And a lot of people were actually enthralled by that, the way how he had that imaginative approach to portrait painting. Now, just to let you know, what we're seeing over here, it is commemoration of Dr. Nicholas Stubb, which is over here a main person in the composition. He was exalted to the position of head surgeon in Surgeon Guild. He was given that position, and because of that, to commemorate that, they had Rembrandt van Rijn painting a portrait of that. Now those anatomy lessons, public anatomy lessons, were actually did occur in time of Rembrandt van Rijn very frequently. What would happen if you have an artist, or excuse me, if you have a master artist as a thief, if you have someone who is condemned to death, they would hang them, which would be public, and this is something that the public enjoyed in, and then after that, the person would also be placed in as his cadaver would be placed in as in part of the anatomy lesson, which is also public. People attended that and they enjoy that as well. Now you're going to see a few things. Now you see they have a compositional core. Something is happening. It is evolved around this cadaver. This is that anatomy lessons that we are discussing. Over here, I just mentioned, any doctors in the room, by the way? Any doctors today? Any doctors? Now, if there's any doctor, in common sense can tell us that anatomy lessons or even autopsies, they don't start with an arm or a hand. They do not start that. But if you have a head of a surgeon guild, someone his primary tool for existence is an arm, but it has weight to it. Rembrandt van Rijn, an artist, his primary tool of existence is also an arm. So you have a little bit of a symbolism over there. Now, you're going to see, let me just explain for a little bit people in the background. They all paid an equal amount to get the portrait done by the master. They would come to him and individually sit down, and they would fuse them in this beautiful imaginative composition. Now you're going to see a few things. This person over here actually holds a paper which has all the names of the people in the composition. All the names are inscribed over here. Now over here you're going to see those three people that they don't mind the painters. They are not looking at us. These two are looking directly into the artist, directly into us. We almost interrupted them. Now over here you're going to see those three. They're not actually looking at the cadaver. They're looking over here at the book. Can you see in a strong foreshortening in the bottom right corner? There's a book. It is an anatomy lesson book, and they are comparing it with the actual lesson that is occurring. It is quite imaginative, the touch that he has. Now this person over here, you're going to see as well, looking at the book and comparing it. It is a portrait that changed how the civic portraits are being created. It is incredible, and one of the most famed artwork that he ever created. Now, his artwork evolved a little bit. He became more focused with Baroque, and over here you're going to see one of the self-portraits that he did of him and Saskia. And over here you're going to see it's a very joyous painting. He is painting himself over here, as you're going to see him. He is holding a tall beer glass. He's a carouser in the inn. Over here you see Saskia. She is also taking a role in this painting. Now what he is actually depicting, it is a story of a prodigal son. We know that he squandered all the money and wealth, and he was carousing in the inn. And Saskia took the role of being a courtesan, a prostitute in this composition, and it was a moving and just a joyous composition that he painted for them two alone. Now, it was in their home all the way to 1656 until he bankrupted, and then they took all of his possession with this painting, unfortunately, as well. But you're going to see now he's moving to that Baroque, moving rather swiftly. And over here you're going to see that apotheosis of Baroque style. Over here you're going to see this beautiful and gorgeous painting, and it is the painting that actually depicts a last king of Babylon. Belshazzar's Feast is the name of the painting. Now it cannot be dated, unfortunately. We know that it's 1630, but last number was omitted, so we don't know. I like to say 5 because that's in the middle of the decade. But over here you're going to see, look at the lights. It is radiant, incandescent, glowing light in the composition. The light is the principal subject matter in this composition. It takes everything. Now, what he's depicting, it's from a book of Daniel. The story goes that the last king of Babylon actually used ships that he took from Jerusalem, that he pillaged from Jerusalem, and he was celebrating pagan gods. And then he had an apparition. He had a writing on the wall, and it says, Mene, Mene, Teku Upharsi, which Daniel was his omen interpreter, Jewish omen interpreter. He told them, it says, God has waited days of your kingdom, and they have been numbered. You've been weighed in a balance and found wanted. Your kingdom will be given to Medes and Persians. Now, if we know the story, he was found dead shortly after the apparition. Now, have a look at the visible and movable and plausible drama that is enacted in this composition. Can you see the facial features Can you imagine yourself, you know, seeing an apparition on the wall? Obviously, this is something that is incredibly palpable and plausible, and he is enacting it in such a moving and incredible way. Absolutely a gorgeous painting, one of his greatest, one of my favorite as well. Now over here, when you're going to talk about his magnum opus, we need to discuss this, his opera prima, as they say, and that is The Night Watch. How many of you have seen it in person? By show of hands over here. Okay, well, a lot of us. It is incredible painting, gorgeous, a huge monumental painting, and it is the most well-known painting that he created, especially in terms of and respect of corporation portraits. Now here we see two main protagonists, Frank Banning de Kock and William de Ruyterberg. These are over here, these two persons in strong foreshortening. Now again, as I said, every person that was painted in the painting and that paid for it would sit in his studio. 18 of them were sitting in the studio. He painted 34 people in this composition. So he would add random people in the composition. Now this painting, when he produced it, it changed how the corporation portraits are being viewed and being painted as well. It changed, it was a complete paradigm shift. First, it was outdoors. It was first time that it was the scene was placed outdoors. Now over here, when we look at this composition, there's a seeming disarray. It looks to us there's a lack of compositional structure in the artwork. But he used very smart ways, smart tools to get an attention on the individual sitters, because there's a common misconception in the world that at Rembrandt Seminar, there had a lot of people that were complaining about being slighted in the composition, because if you are Frank Banning de Kock and you are this person over here and you paid equal amounts to get this portrait done, well, there's people would think that this person would be indignant and angry. But there was no record of anyone complaining for being slighted in the composition. The painting was an instant success, and also a lot of another corporation portraits were painted afterwards. So that means people were happy and satisfied. What he would use, you see the flag post, he would use a spear, and it actually brings our attention to the sitter. Now, it must be noted, this is not a night scene at all, even though dark and light is the way how he portrayed a chiaroscuro. Half of it is dark. So he was working with a lot of dark composition. This was a lot darker composition than he would normally paint it, but it was another night scene. And after a few hundred years of layers of dirt and dust that was placed on that painting, in end of 18th century, militias had nothing to do except performing night watches. Obviously there's no war happening for that matter. So they named it a night watch because it makes sense to them. Now after it was being restored, the restorer found out that it was a day scene. It was not a night scene at all. It was a bit darker, but it was a day scene. Now this painting was severely mistreated, and it has a long history of mistreatment, and obviously because of all the dirt and all that, but also it was cut down in its size, which I want to show you. I want to show you the actual painting, how it is being created. Now, the reason we know how the original painting looked like is Frank Banning de Kock, who was the main protagonist. He commissioned an artist, a minor artist in Amsterdam, to create a copy of the actual night watch. So because of that, we can see how it actually looks. This is original painting, and it was painted by Gerrit Lundens, and he is almost, his artwork is equally famous as the night watch. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of back and forth so you can see the difference. Obviously, you're going to see these two people, they are omitted over here. You're going to see over here, this part as well is omitted. I'm going to flip it through, and over here you're going to see this part severely. If you look at over here, you're going to see those two people are missing. There's the painting is more immediate because this introduction into the painting was omitted. And also, but can't you see what over here we see the actual arch? Now, this is a painting that was painted of a militia in Amsterdam. Now, How many of you have been to Amsterdam? I'm sure. I was curious. Show of hands. Yes? Is there any arch in Amsterdam? None. But he imagined it, and it represented the city that they're guarding. And this is something that it moved people, and they liked it, is imaginative thinking, because what they're doing, they are showing value of preparedness, value of arms. You see, they have muskets, and they are ready. They are ready, and they are all doing something. They are in movement, no posing whatsoever. And that's the painting that completely changed the picture, how they are being created. Last thing that I'll mention over here, I'm going to use the original Night Watch because obviously we want to talk about Rembrandt, get lumens. Over here, you're going to see this person over here has its own light source. If you're going to see, it's arbitrary. She has that incandescent feel, and this is believed that it's been Saskia. Now, what the historians believe, he painted a young girl. She's carrying a fowl over here, which is a symbol for militia. But in 1642, his beloved wife Saskia passed away from a bloody tuberculosis. And he was so touched by that, he wanted to commemorate that, and he changed the facial features into one of Saskia to pay homage to beloved wife. And he gave her that light source that is unbelievable in its arbitrary light source. But he also placed himself inside over here, the back of the composition. He was a prodigious self-portrait painter, one of the most prolific self-portrait painters. And he would place himself very often in those compositions, but no one minded. He was a very famous artist, and people didn't mind at all, because after all, he was a great Rembrandt Seminar. Now here, I want to show you what he would do in terms of these self-portraits. He would study himself incessantly, because this is the easiest way to study psychological portraiture. This is why it was so good, because if after you exhaust your mother and your brother and your sister and you paint them over and over again, they don't really want to pose anymore. So what is the cheapest way to study these facial features in psychological portraiture? Well, you paint yourself, and he did that. You're going to see, in fact, in terms of etching, in respect of etching, he did that. But if you look at him, it is not that he's posing. He is in movement. He is in action. He's speaking. He's talking. And this is how he studied himself with precision. And because of that, he was one of the most well-known self-portrait painter. And in fact, I want to show you one of the painting that he created of himself. This is a self-portrait that is so commanding. You're going to see words like Solomonic leapt in our minds when we look at it. It's powerfully serious, and there's such a sense of intelligence and probity that we see when we look at this painting. Now over here you're going to see he collected a lot of costumes. He would place and put himself in a lot of costumes. Now I have to say, we know he lived an ostentatious life, well beyond his means, and because of that he bankrupt. But what he did, he would be one of the first few people every morning in Amsterdam waiting for ships to arrive. And he would be the one who would purchase all the different things. He would collect weapons. He would collect art. He would collect a lot of different curiosities. And even though they were useful for his expression and creative potential that would be furthered and deepened, it was a little bit more that he can chew. He would bite a little bit more than he could chew, as we know that, as he did eventually bankrupt, and didn't have a dime to his name. Now, I want to show you one of the paintings that is one of my favorite paintings, and it can be seen in Hermitage Museum, and it is Danae. Anyone seen the painting? Been to Hermitage, by the way, by show of hands? Fantastic. This was a painting that was purchased in mass by Catherine the Great, one of the first 225 that she purchased, and from a get-go, since it was acquired, it was a superstar of the collection, and it is incredibly moving painting. Now we know it is from Avid Metamorphosis. It is painted by many different artists in the history of the world. It speaks about King Acrisius, who was foretold by the Delphic oracle that his grandson or son of his daughter will actually kill him. Because of that, he placed her in a tower, locked her in a tower, so he can escape his destiny that was foretold to him. Now we know that Zeus came, and the story goes, Zeus came and he showered her in gold. We can see this. Zeus is over here. But we're going to look over this with this painting. What do we see? Now it is not idealized at all. We know that, especially before Rembrandt van Rijn, when Danae would be painted, or Venus, it would be idealized. She would have that deity sense to it. Over here, this one is a little bit too round, too oval to be idealized. He painted just a regular woman at the time from Amsterdam or Holland. But what do we see over here? She is awaiting someone. The love that she is waiting for so long, it is coming to her. And it is a marvelous painting, very moving painting. Now, the reason why I'm showing you, this painting was severely vandalized in 1987 by sulfuric acid and a knife. And very big portion of the painting was damaged, 30% of it. And one of the most important, the nude, was severely damaged. And in 1995, it was rehung after it was quote-unquote restored. Now, naturally, I have not seen this painting before the attack, and I was apprehensive to see after it was repainted, because this is exactly what it amounted to, a repainting. Now, what it seemed to me as a skillful attempt to restore is invention. Certainly more preferable to leaving it in that desecrated state. It solidified my belief, strong belief, that true artist's imagining, his pictorial invention, is such a potent thing that it survives indignities and damages inflicted upon it by time, by accidents, by persons. Because when you look at this artwork, moving, enthralling quality of Danae awaiting love is intact, even though its surface has been compromised. And I am a firm believer that's power of great art. There's a lot of art that's been damaged in the history of the world, but the message is still there. This is one of the greats that I had to share with you over here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about his self-portrait. I've spoken about it a little bit on the last lecture, but I'll show you two etchings. I want to show you these two portraits that we have. Two portraits that he created of himself. Now, over here on your left, you're going to see one of the most famous self-portraits that he painted of himself. This is the most Renaissance portrait that he created. Now, over here, this is amalgam worthy of the alchemist, so to speaking, but because he took two paintings from art history and he mixed them together to create this of himself. He took a Baldassare Castiglione, a portrait by Raphael that he painted, and he took another portrait by Titian, a man with a blue sleeve, and mixed those two together to create this portrait. Now, we know this because Rembrandt van Rijn would visit the auctions, and he would record, he would sketch what he sees. If he doesn't collect the artwork, he would sketch, and immediately he would rework the artwork to his way of liking, how he wants to change and amend the painting. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. This is Raffaello Baldassare Castiglione portrait, incredible portrait. Oh, here you're going to see a Titian self-portrait as well, a man with a blue sleeve. And he amalgamated the two to create this portrait. It was 1 meter high. And this is a painting that was saying to the world, I am the great Rembrandt van Rijn. Over here, as I said, let me reiterate this again, he is not a painter over here. is a bourgeois and a gentleman. The greatest painter. Queen of Sweden bribed her way to get a portrait done by the master. Look at him. It is so self-assuring, confident in his destiny. You're going to see he's dressed to the nine in the finest clothing. Look at the hat. So compact, compelling, and commanding. Now let's look at the other portrait over here on your right side. What we see is complete antithesis. Completely. You're going to see the look is a troubled one. Self-appraising look, you see. Sagging cheeks. The facial expression down. Have a look at the clothing. It is nothing even close what do we see over here. He is emotional destitute, social recluse. And he portrayed that in the compositions. And this is why most of us, we can associate with Rembrandt and Rijn, because we understand, all of us, we experienced pain, personal pain in our life. We all did in some way or another, and we can associate with that. This person is, it is not a person, it is someone of a higher crust of society. And he had that rise and fall. That is why the history records Rembrandt as someone who people can relate to. Now, we talked a lot about his painting, and I fervently do believe he's one of the greatest painters in the history of the world. But his great and greatest legacy that he left to us was a medium of etching. Etching is something that he did not invent in a way that we know it, but he did create a medium of it. Someone asked me in the last lecture, because Albert Dürer started and tried etchings, and someone said, did you dismiss Albert Dürer as an etcher? Yes, I did dismiss Albert Dürer as an etcher. Unfortunately, he was not a great etcher. He was the greatest woodcutter and incredible engraver as well. Leonardo da Vinci as well was an incredible engraver. But etching is different, because in engraving you have to scrape pieces of the plate. He was very good at that, because it was very similar to wood blocking techniques when you remove the negative space. Now what we have over here, it's different. He has to draw the design into the plate. Now I'm going to explain you the difference. Now this is one of the etchings that he did, and this is one of the finest etching that he produced, and many of them were virtually the same, because he is known as the greatest etcher of all time, even 360 years after he passed away, 350. And what do we have? Generally it's 5x8 plate. Copper or zinc would be used. Now that is a mistake that Albert Dürer made. He used steel. Steel is sturdy, and you can't work on steel. When you submerge it in the acid bath, it's not going to have that pliable effect. You don't get the nuance effect. Now, Rembrandt and Rijn took copper or zinc. It's more softer, more malleable. Then he covers it with the acid-resistant ground. Beeswax or resin, something would be used, acid resistant. And then he is not removing any parts of the plate. He's drawing the design into the plate. Now, if this is design, you have an apparition over here, it has to be drawn on the right side. It's vice versa. We know this. When you see an ambulance, when you look at it, if you stand in front of the ambulance, it's right from left to right. But if you look at it in the rearview mirror, it says ambulance. It's the same gist. Everything is a mirror image. Now, he is drawing the design. When he is happy with what he drew, he takes that plate, submerges it in the acid bath. Now, that acid would then bite those lines. Those lines will become ink wells. The deeper the well, more ink can hold, the darker the color. Must be noted as well. When he's happy, he takes it out, wipes the plate clean, takes an ink roller with dark ink, rolls it on top, wipes the plate clean again. Now, ink settled only in incisions. Make sense so far? Fantastic. He takes a water dump paper. Incredibly important that it's water dump because there's a high pressure printing press that will go through. So if it's water dump, it will not crush and it will not break. He pushes it through the high pressure printing press, then paper crushes into those incisions, collects the ink. On the other side, you have a mirror image impression of what is being created. That all that I just explained to you is a process for getting one tone of dark, one tone of black. How many tones you see here? You see black and white and 50 shades of gray. So in order for you to get 50 shades of gray, you have to start with the lightest tones. You start with the lightest. You stop the lightest tones because they are the shallowest one, and then you submerge it back again. And then you take it out, you stop another part of it, and you submerge it back again. If you have 50 shades of gray, you have to have 50 levels of gradations, 50 different depths of those inkwells. Incredible amount of control one needs to have and commandment of the medium, especially if you're the first who's doing it in such manner. There's no precedent for that. People used it for cards of saints, for books, not as a mean of expression. Rembrandt would carry a copper plate in his pocket, as people, the artists would carry a sketch pad with them. He would carry a copper plate. Wherever he go, he would etch incessantly. And this is why he is known as the greatest of them all. I don't think in our time, you never know, obviously change is only what is constant, but there's not much that can be added to the nuanced effect of the artwork. Have a look at this. This is breathtaking in its technical virtuosity, and it's more nuanced in its descriptive detail. Look at this. Nothing can prepare us for what we see here. Again, the drama that is enacted over here, it is believable, it's plausible. You see apparition, he's telling them that Jesus will be born into it. Look at the incandescent field that we see over here. Look at the trees. I want to show you. Look at the details. You have the shepherds over here running. It's complete chasm. And he's doing it on a very small pi/8 plate. There's not much that one can advance in terms of descriptive realism, at least, in that medium. That's why he's known as the greatest etcher that ever lived. Now, I want to read you something by Filippo Baldinucci. He wrote this following statement. Now, I'm just going to go back because this is where I have the note. Filippo Baldinucci was a great art historian. He was in Italy, in Florence at the time, worked for Cosimo Medici. With Cosimo Medici, he understood art with precision. Now, the reason why I want to read you this, because I don't want to omit anything. I want you to have a full statement that he had to see how people thought of Rembrandt's etching, even back in those days. Please listen to this following. It is 1634, wherein this artist truly distinguished himself was in certain most bizarre manner, which he invented the etching on copper plates. This manner too was entirely his own, not used by others, nor seen again, with certain scratches or varying strength and irregular and isolated stroke. He produced deep chiaroscuro of great strength. And truth to tell, this particular branch of engraving, Rembrandt was much more highly esteemed by professors of art than in painting. We can agree or don't agree with the full statement that Filippo Baldinucci made, but it shows us what people thought even in his time about his etching's abilities. Even then, he is considered as the greatest. And that is true till this day. And I said to you many times, every great artist knew if they want to be remembered in pantheon of great art, they needed to know how to etch, and then because they will be compared with Rembrandt van Rijn. I want to show you. For example, look at this. Look at what he produced on a 5/8 plate. You're going to see rigorous and archaeologically analytical structure of the composition. This pictorial space is determined by system, structure, and proportion. It almost has a mathematical constituent. Look at the figures. They almost have a sculptural quality. Very dignified. Pontius Pilate and Jesus Christ, we know the story. You're going to see how he elevated that to that dignified effect. And all that on a plate. This is why he is known as the greatest master of etching. Now, everyone been to Malaga Museum of Picasso Malaga Museum in Spain? Now, if you were there, just to let you know, please don't take photos there. They're going to hound you like dogs, and it's just very, very difficult. I actually took a few photos and I almost regret it because of that. Over here, you're going to see, this is what they have over there. Now, I showed you already in the preceding lecture. I'm going to just reiterate that fact because it is Picasso's museum. And Pablo Picasso was a fervent, incessant etcher. He knew if he wants to be remembered as one of the greatest of them all, he will be compared with Rembrandt. He needed to at least match his genius, as very difficult would be to surpass his genius. No one has done that yet. Over here you're going to see the tools that the artist would use in the etching creative process. But over here, you actually can see this etching that I just talked about. The apparition over here. This is Rembrandt's, this is Goya's. Because Pablo Picasso, he would rival the two greatest etchers, Goya and Rembrandt. Goya was influenced by Rembrandt as well. And he knew he's going to be compared with Rembrandt, Goya as well. He knew that. That's why Dali etched, Chagall etched, everyone who, even Peter Max, the artists that are contemporary artists, they are etching as well. They have to. It's one of the most coveted and one of the most difficult mediums. And it correlates you and compares you with one of the greats. Wouldn't you want to be compared with Rembrandt and Ryan? If you're an artist, I believe that you would want to be in that actual name process. Now over here, I'm just going to say that Piero and Aldo Kromelik, one was his printmakers in the latter portion of his life that worked with him, they said he worked with such ease and quality, Picasso, that even the old master would be embarrassed. Now what does that all mean to us? That I think in future as well, every artist that will want to be up there will have to etch. That's just one of the most important mediums that Rembrandt left to us, and it is his legacy. And over here, you're going to see this person pretending that he knows what he's doing over here. This is me in the Malaga Museum. Now, you're going to see this is a modern day printing press, but you're going to see it's a high pressure printing press that you put a little copper plate, 5 by 8, and with a little piece of paper on top of it. And this is when you produce the actual artwork. Now, before I wrap it up and finish the lecture, I would like to, if you want, there is a history of etching plates, of Rembrandt etching plates, that is quite interesting. And it goes from 1600s all the way till this day. If you want to know what happened with them, I'll share you that story. Do you want to know? You really want to know? Okay, fantastic. I'll give you a quick little story. I'm just going to tell you some of the major names, dates, and years what happened. Because Rembrandt, he produced over 300 etchings, just over 300 etchings during his entire life. Just over 300. Now, when he bankrupted, we don't know with the exactitude did they left the plates to him because he was means of, for living, or he clandestinely gave those away. I'm actually inclined to go with the latter because they took everything. Why wouldn't they take the plates as well? So he gave him to his attorney and a friend. His name was Clement Dayon, and he has recorded in his possession, but they did not record all of the plates. He recorded 74 plates in his possession. 74. Now, that's when 1668, 1 year before he passed away. Then those plates were in his possession, and then 1767, a gentleman by the name of Pierre Fouquet purchased those plates and immediately resold those 74 plates to the name of Claude Henry Waterley, who was an art dealer, and he had some of the plates in his own possession as well. And he took those plates, and he had them in his possession all the way till 1787, when he sold it to the gentleman by the name of Pierre-François Besson. Now, just to let you know, Pierre-François Besson purchased 78 plates of Claude Henry Waterley. And he had 5 of the plates in his own possession. Now we have 1787, there is 83 plates in existence. What happened with the rest? We don't know. Lost in the history of the world and famines and wars. Not sure yet, maybe they will come up somewhere in the future, but 83 are known in existence. Now he pulled a recueil of these plates. Recueil is an impression of the plates. Posthumous impression that they pull. Now these are incredibly important. Do we have those little pieces of paper that we gave away, everyone?
Yeah.
We didn't give them. Okay, well, I'll give you a little bio and a little cheat sheet. You're going to see some of these plates that are posthumous plates. Impressions of these plates, they go up to a few $1 million. They are very, very coveted. Incredibly coveted. So, he pulled a small requiem, small impression of these 83 plates. And he passed away. 11 years later, he passed away. 1798, his son, Henri Louis Bassan, he inherited those 83 plates. And he pulled a small requiem. Now, very small, you have to understand. You're pushing it through a high-pressure printing press. Now, what he did as well, he destroyed 5 of the plates. Inadvertently, very nascent, he destroyed 5 of the plates in the process. Didn't know what he was doing. Unfortunately, it will be recorded. Incalculable loss for the history of the world. Now, he pulled a small requiem, and after that, in 1810, he sold, from 1805 to 1810, he sold those 78 plates to the gentleman by the name of Auguste Jean. Auguste Jean took those plates, pulled a very small requiem again. Very small. I mean, few impressions at the time. And then he had it in his possession all the way to 1846, when he passed away. His widow took those plates and sold them to the gentleman by the name of Auguste Bernard. He had it in his possession. He was an art dealer. He did nothing with them. He had it until his possession until he passed away. And then his son, Michael Bernard, in 1906, sells it to the name of Alvin Beaumont. Alvin Beaumont has those 78 plates, takes them and pulls a small requiem of the 78 plates. Pulls a very small requiem. And also, he decides that never requiem will be put off these plates. Never going to be pulled again. So he put a varnish on top of it. He varnished the plates. He took leather-bound casings, very beautiful leather-bound casings. He put them in leather-bound casings and he gave it to the Reich Museum. He loaned it to the Reich Museum. They had them display there. Now, he suggested to the curator of the Reich Museum, so they purchased the plates from him, which I believe are the most myopic decision in the history of Reich Museum. Is the curator rather foolishly said, no, we don't need this. Why would we have a night watch? We have the paintings. Why are we going to purchase this? He said no. Incredible. 1916, he puts them on the market, and they are being sold to the American doctor, Dr. Robert Lee Humbert. He was a doctor from North Carolina, and he worked in Paris. Purchased 78 of the plates, and he brought them to North Carolina. He places them in a museum in Raleigh, North Carolina. 78 plates, one of the greatest collection of Rembrandt Van Rijn in North Carolina, the hub of the art world. Now, if you've ever been to North Carolina, you know that's kind of counterintuitive, even though Raleigh is actually now expanding rapidly. Now, they have those plates. 1970, Robert Lee Humbert passes away, and the plates are still there. All the way till 1993, for 23 years, those plates were there. No one has touched them or moved them. Now, they were restoring the museum in Raleigh, Carolina, and they approached his progeny, his children, and they said to them, listen, we're restoring this museum. Do you want to keep the plates with you? Or we will put it in the vault, and when we restore the museum, we'll put them back. I mean, they're yours. And his children said, sir, what? We own those plates? We'll take them, thank you very much. They didn't even know they owned the plates. 2 weeks after, all the plates were pushed on a marketplace. Artemis Gallery in London brokered the sale. Now, obviously, the plates, it was too big of a chunk for someone to chew on, because it happened very fast. So they were sold individually to individual collectors. Now here comes into play Dr. Robert Light. He was sent there by Howard Berger to go in London to pick the 8 of the finest plates. He picked the 8 of the finest plates and he brought them back to the United States. Now Howard Berger wanted to do a millennium edition, a last requiem in this millennium. Now for that he needed a master printmaker. He found Dr. Emiliano Sorini. a master printmaker worked for monarch of Spain, or king of Spain. When someone would visit the king of Spain, he would pull an impression of some of the etchings that they have over there in the collection as a gift. And he approached him with an idea. Now bear in mind, there's varnish still on top of those plates. But what he wanted was 2,500 impressions of each of the plates. Copper plates, 2,500 times through this. He said, no way, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to take part in this. I don't want to be remembered as someone who destroyed 8 of the plates from Rembrandt. But he was persistent. Howard Berger, they found a way to still face the plates. They were not going to be connected. They will have a magnetic field between them, and you can still put the ink on top. They decided they were going to do it. Then they started to printing the 8 of the plates. It began. And now they were in the vault. They would take it out when they were printed. Now, in a process, Emiliano Sorini passed away. He never saw fruition of the entire process. Marjorie van Dyck, she was his pupil. She was a student, a brilliant woman. She finished the project. Now, at the time, they didn't have a marketplace for it. You have a 2,500 impression. They were not printed just yet, but you need to find where you're going to market those. And they approached Albert Scaglione, founder and owner of Park West Gallery that I represent. They approached him and say, hey, you know, you have millions of people collecting from you. How about you partake in this incredible project? And Albert said, partake? I don't want to partake. I want to buy the whole thing. He purchased the whole thing. Purchased the right of the plates, purchased the impressions, purchased the whole thing. Indelibly will be remembered in history as going to be his name associated with this project. Now, anyone who's been cruising more than 15 years, I'm sure you've seen this. Anyone been seeing Rembrandt on board a ship before? We had more of them before. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of these anymore in the world, so you know, you don't get to see them very often. Now, they were being released in Millennium Edition. They finished the project, and in fact, there were a few $1,000s at the time. One of those Millennium Edition, it's called Rising of Lazarus, is the first one that was sold out. It is now appraised at $18,000, and the highest recording selling price point on the auction is $24,000. Active bidding. Incredible, something that's been created about 20 years ago. The impression, not the one a few hundred years ago. They go a lot more. Now, just to finish the story. Now, what happened, we finished the project, and then Albert Scaglione, our owner and founder, he decides he wants to give those plates back to Raleigh, Carolina. They are our rightful owners. They should display those artworks there. So he goes there to curator, and he says, hey, would you like those plates back? We're going to loan them to you indefinitely so you can display them. And the curator said, yes, absolutely, but we want it in the original copper form. No steel facing. Marjorie van Dyck takes those 8 plates. It took her 4 years. 4 years, mild acids to remove the steel facing. 6 months for 1 plate. Removed it, and our gallery director for entire gallery, Maurice Shapiro, he says, he was in LaGuardia, New York airport. They had a backpack that was created by Swiss Army, special backpack with 8 pouches for those plates. You can imagine how he felt. An art historian holding 8 plates that Rembrandt van Rijn held in his hands and created. Incredible, visceral feeling. And he said he flew them to North Carolina, Raleigh, and they hang there right now. It says it was loaned by Park West Gallery, and there's an impression of each of them. This is a story of the actual etching plates. Now, this concludes our lecture. By the way, did you learn something? Did you enjoy yourself? By a round of applause. You learned something? Fantastic. True pleasure. Now, I move a little bit slower, so I speak longer. I want to give you as much as value as I can. Why? If you're listening, I'm going to talk. That's my logic. Now, tomorrow we have a fast and fun art auction. I'm going to do it a bit slower, so we are all on the same page, but it's still going to be fun and fast. So don't miss out on that. That is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'm going to have a lecture as well at 11 o'clock. It's called Colorful World of Peter Max. This is an artist that is a master of our time. an incredible colorist, and I want to talk a little bit about his life and, you know, talk about some of his stories. Incredible stories. You are going to be dumbfounded with the amount of information and the achievement that this artist has done already. Now, before I'll let you leave, I have a raffle that I promised that I give you. I'm going to do a raffle, quick raffle over here, and I'm going to just, at the end, we're just going to take, yeah, we'll stop the camera, that's fine.